I've got nothing at all to lose. I've got everything to gain. If I'm called to the priesthood, then I'll figure it out. And if I'm not called to the priesthood, it'll be okay. It makes perfect sense for me to go and give this a shot, even if it's not what God wants me to do. If it's not what he's calling me to, he's going to show me. And if it is what he's calling me to, then I will have done exactly the right thing.
It takes a little bit to receive correction from an older brother seminarian or an older brother in general, and to not just be like, whatever, dude, right? Like, just to kind of write it off. But to have the humility to be like, no, you're right. Like, I could be better here, right? Like, to actually internalize that, that's awesome. And then also even the humility to be like, yeah, I was in the wrong. Like, I sincerely apologize for saying that. In today's world, Catholic men face countless challenges on the road to holiness. Addiction, anger, self-doubt, relationship struggles, and so much more. These battles can leave us stuck in mediocrity. But the truth is, we're made for more. The world needs good men. Welcome to the Hey Brother podcast, where we dive into these real struggles and share from our own experience as brothers and husbands and fathers. Together, we'll explore how to overcome life's challenges and become the men God created us to be. So grab a seat, brother, and remember, you're not alone. Hey, welcome back to the Hey Brother podcast. My name is Nick Clooney, founder of Crafted for More. I'm your host, and I have this desire, this passion to help men become who God's created them to be. And this is something that, is just a great mission that I love to invite men into. And that's why I do these recordings, to interview men who are living that call out to be who God's called them to be. And this week I'm joined by guest Father Sam Kachuba. I think that's how you say his last name. I'm not 100% sure on that. But I interview him. Me and him both went through the Catholic Psych program and are certified mentors. And so we talk about that a little bit. And I want to jump in here just at the beginning to let you know that the audio and the video got messed up just a little bit. Something I normally try to fix in the back end on editing, but I didn't get a chance to this time because I couldn't figure out what the problem was. Well, I know what the problem was. I didn't figure out how to fix it. Usually I like to leave the episodes unedited as much as possible, but this is something that I would have loved to fix, but it was something with the way that we record it and really like the streaming. Like, we were trying to stream and video record this, and our streams were off just by a little bit, and so you get a little bit of an audio delay at some points, but it's not too bad. But I just wanted to preface that and let you guys know heading into this episode. It's a really great conversation, and so glad to have you here. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Father Sam. All right, so I have the honor of being joined by Father Sam for this episode of Hey Brother. I don't know a ton about you, Father Sam. I was on your podcast last week, or I don't know when it's actually officially dropping, but that was me talking a lot about myself and not getting to actually know you. And so I think that's like I'm just curious, kind of starting things off, like, who is this man that I get to do the Catholic Psych stuff with? But tell me about yourself.
Yeah. The advantage of reciprocal podcasting is that you got to come on my podcast, and I got to know you and got to hear a little bit more of your story. And now this is a chance for me to get to know you, for you to get to know me. So I get to talk a little bit there. Yeah. Who am I, man? I'm a priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Born and raised here in the diocese. I am from Stratford, Connecticut originally. Grew up there. Okay. I'm the oldest of two sons. So I have one brother who now lives in Richmond, Virginia. My parents also now live in Richmond, Virginia. So they've abandoned me and left me here all by my lonesome. No. It was
jump ship from Connecticut.
Yeah, exactly. It's been such a good move for all of them too. My brother and sister-in-law are down there. My parents retired, and they've been enjoying retirement a lot. I've been a priest for 16 years, and of those 16 years, I've spent most of my priesthood at one parish. So I'm assigned now as the pastor of St. Pius X Parish in Fairfield, and I just marked my 10th anniversary as pastor here. But before I was pastor, I was also here for 2.5 years as a parochial vicar. So. Yeah, the bulk of my time as a priest has been in this one particular location, just with a 4-year break in between.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Is it? Do dioceses typically set up the like rotation similarly across the country? Like, are you gonna be there for 12 years and then like move, or is that like all up in the air?
Everything's up in the air. I think that the reality is that there's the theory of how priest personnel assignments would work in a diocese. So we have something. It sounds like you guys might have something similar. A term of 6 years as a pastor, and then that can be renewed for a second term of 6 years, and then theoretically you'd move to a new assignment. We are just now. This is the first time we've ever had term limits for pastors. So we're just now at like the end of the first time that a pastor might have reached the 12-year mark, and we're going to find out if the bishop decides to move guys or not, if it's a real number. So we don't really know. It's going to be fun. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Yeah, I think I'm definitely sort of an outlier in terms of having been assigned here as an associate and then reassigned later as a pastor. That's not something that seems to me, at least, to be super common. It happens, but not like the most common thing in the world. So
yeah, to go back to a place you've already are familiar with to some degree, and
right.
serve. Yeah,
it's been a huge blessing too, because knowing the place, and my diocese is really small. We are the third smallest geographical diocese in the country, as far as I know. And so being born and raised here, there's only a handful of places that I would really feel out of my depth. Like I don't know anything or anyone from here or in this area. I've never been here before. And now that I've been a priest in the diocese for so long, like I've at least got a flavor of every place, I think. I could be very wrong about that. I'm sure that the Lord will surprise me in many ways, but I feel like I kind of know what's going on and where things are. So yeah.
That's good. What I got a question about priesthood. Like, are you one of those priests that's like, I've always known that I want to be a priest, or is there more of a story to like the discernment process?
Well, my favorite answer to the question, why did you become a priest, is I couldn't get a job and she said no. But
yeah,
I feel like that never really does it justice. No, I can't say that I always wanted to be a priest, but from the time that it struck me that I should be a priest, I don't think I've ever really had anything else in mind. So I say that I didn't always want to be a priest. And for sure, growing up, I had no inclination towards the priesthood. I had no idea that being a priest was a viable option for me or anything like that. Like, you talk to some people and they played priest in their living room when they were a little kid. They would go to mass on Sunday, and then their afternoon playtime activity was dressing up as a priest and playing mass. I never did anything like that. I mean, I was raised in a very...
I've seen this picture on social media where, or not social, is like a reel, and it's like a Catholic mom, and she's like, I give my kids choice. It's like she's videotaping what you're saying, like the kids like playing mass. Yeah. She's like, they have all the choice in the world. They can decide if they want to be a Dominican, a Benedictine, or like whatever they want to be. Like, that's their choice. And I was just like, that's great.
It's so good.
So you're saying your experience, you weren't that kid.
No, definitely not. I was raised in a very Catholic household. We went to mass every Sunday. Yeah. We said, well, even then, I think there's a very Catholic can vary from person to person. So when I say very Catholic, I mean, like, we went to mass on Sunday and holy days of obligation. I served mass as a kid. I was an altar boy. We said grace before meals. We said prayers before bed at night. And that was kind of the environment that I lived in. So I didn't really have an inkling towards the priesthood at all. If you ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wanted to be the catcher for the New York Mets. That was the goal. Was to play professional baseball. And I just about cracked 5'7", so I figured I could definitely never make it in MLB or the NBA or any of the professional sports. I'm just not big enough. And I'm not very good either, as it turns out. So that kind of, over time, I accepted that fate. But I grew up playing music. My dad's a musician. And so I played a lot of music. I've played the violin since I was 4. So playing music has always been a huge part of my life. So there were lots of other things that I thought I would do. that did not involve the priesthood. Whether it was like
Do you still get it?
There was the impossible dream.
You still get a chance to play music?
I do, fortunately. I do get to play, which is a huge gift. To be able to play, unfortunately, it's not as often as I would like. I'd like more time to practice. That's just not there because I'm a priest and the hours in the day just don't exist. But every once in a while, there's a possibility.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, what were you saying before I asked that question?
Oh, just that I think I looked at a lot of other things. And if there was any one thing that was consistent for me, it was that I wanted to teach. I thought it'd be really cool to be a teacher. My dad was a teacher also, so there's a little bit of following in Dad's footsteps, but he was a science teacher and I had no interest in teaching science. But there was a sense of like being around students and being able to teach was a really good thing. So it wasn't until I was in eighth grade that I first started thinking about priesthood. And I didn't start thinking about priesthood voluntarily. When I was in eighth grade, my class in our school yearbook voted me most likely to become a priest, which I thought was a pretty,
really?
Yeah, it's a horrible thing to say to somebody. As I understood it, most likely to become a priest was equivalent to saying you're a loser who will never have a girlfriend. And so I was, I was rather despondent about that whole thing.
Yeah.
And so I went to high school kind of determined to prove everybody wrong.
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
Like, to go back to that, like, that's interesting, like, that you viewed it in that way, right? Like, and maybe there's like a little, like, you're building it up a little bit in it, like, by telling the story, right? And maybe it wasn't exactly like how you felt, but it probably was pretty close to how you felt. Yeah. It's interesting that you like interpret it that way. Do you think like all your classmates like would have? Do you think that's what they were saying?
I think there was a little bit of that. Of course, okay. by doing that, I'm maybe assigning the worst of motives to my classmates, and I want to be charitable to them. Like I liked my class. I didn't have any real problems with anybody, but there was something there. I feel like maybe that they thought that I would never have a girlfriend. I don't know, but yeah. They also just might have thought I was a huge dork, and that priests have to be dorks or nerds or something like that. And I don't know. I mean, the other reality of it though is that I was the kid who everybody knew that I served at mass. When we went to school masses, I knew all the responses. I actually sang the hymns. And so if nothing else, I was the kid who knew how to behave in church, maybe better than some of my classmates. And so that made me as much a target for being a priest as anything else. And probably something I didn't realize until I was in high school was that I was really good at religion class. I was I was always a straight A student in religion class. Going from one Catholic school, having been voted most likely to become a priest, my goal was to prove everybody wrong as I got into high school. So I'm just going to demonstrate by everything that I do that I won't become a priest. And so step one in demonstrating that I wasn't going to be a priest was I chose to go to a Catholic high school. And then step two in demonstrating that I wasn't going to become a Catholic priest was the first club that I joined at the Catholic high school that I chose to go to was I joined the club, the campus ministry club that like set up for all the school masses and organized the choirs and things like that. And then the third thing that I did was I got super involved in the parish youth group. So I did all the Catholic things in an effort to prove to everybody that I was not going to be a Catholic priest. So
you showed them.
Yeah, exactly. Man, did I ever tell them. What's funny is like I did all of that stuff and I didn't think anything of it. Like, and I think part of it was my parents made it very clear I was going to a Catholic high school. There was a certain amount of choice that I had. Just like he can be anything, he can do whatever he wants. He can be a Benedictine, he can be a Franciscan, he can be a Dominican. It was like, you can go to St. Joe's, you can go to Notre Dame. Those are your choices. So I chose St. Joe's. Yeah. So there I was at St. Joseph High School. And just you start getting involved and you're kind of dipping your toe in a little bit of everything. I joined a whole bunch of clubs just to experiment with them and see if any of them like fit for me. And I think I went to the first meeting of all of them and then never went back. But campus ministry, I stayed super active in and very much a part of. And then it really wasn't until I was in like a little bit later in high school, around my sophomore year, that I went on a retreat and was introduced to the idea of praying to know what it was that God wanted me to do. So I prayed,
Yeah.
and I said, God, what is it that you want? And for the first time in my life, it wasn't just an idea that somebody else had suggested as a joke, or it wasn't just something that was sort of out there as something embarrassing. It was something in my heart that was saying, be a priest. And it was not insulting, and it was not scary. It still wasn't something that I wanted. And so I was resistant to it, but really from that point on, the idea wouldn't go away. And then as I went through like a process of discernment and really started to grow in my understanding of what that would mean, and over the course of the rest of high school, I was praying with this and thinking about it a lot. And I realized, number one, the idea isn't going anywhere, and it's going to torment me if I don't pay attention to it. And number two, it's not just an idea of something that like I'm forced to do or I'm supposed to do. This is actually becoming something that I kind of want. I think I might want to do this. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The was there like the interior space to like really like know this is God when you like heard that call the first time? Like what was that like? Because you said you were on a retreat, and that's when you had that first thought, or was it like what is this that I'm experiencing? Like, do you know what I'm trying to ask there? Like with the
I think
interior life.
I think up to that point there had been virtually no interior life for me, or at least like whatever I did in terms of prayer and spiritual life was very surface level. It was very much because everybody else did it. But it was around that time that I had started praying on my own, and so I had started to experience a little bit of what it was like to experience the inner spiritual peace that comes from prayer. I had become alert to and aware of the fact that God is present when we pray, that Jesus is there waiting for us in the tabernacle, that the Eucharist is real, that the Eucharist is Jesus. Yeah. So I'd started coming to this understanding. And then this particular retreat was like, that was the aha moment. That was the light going on. That was the veil being lifted. That was the spot where like, there was no question in my mind, and there has never been a question in my mind about who was speaking in my heart when I heard that call to be a priest. And never any question. That was God speaking. I think there were some later questions about whether or not I was right to hear the specific thing that I heard. Like maybe he said something different. Maybe I just misheard him, and it rhymed with priest. He told me to be a beast. I don't know. None of that ever happened. It was priesthood. It was priesthood all the way.
That's awesome. The I think it's interesting. Like when you look at the space to actually receive those words from God, I feel like even like now it's like I have to do a check. I'm like, is this just my thoughts, or is this like actually me like sitting and like listening? And then especially like as like you said high schooler, was that when this was happening? Like later in high school, like I could see that being like an easy thing just to dismiss and be like, sure, nah, I'm just thinking these things. Like, is this really God talking? Or like what you're saying, like later, like, is that really what he said? Like, does he really want me to be a priest? Like, like those kinds of thoughts can really creep in and make it difficult to like, how am I supposed to navigate and actually hear God's voice? That's something that like, I feel like as men, like, there's a strong desire to have like a concrete, like, this is it. And like, you can hold on to it and like point to it and be like, yeah, I definitely heard it, or I definitely didn't hear it.
Right.
And it sounds like you got a little bit of that experience with this retreat moment. But then like the doubting started to come in a little bit later.
Yeah, for sure that the doubting was there. I mean, part of the story is not just that I had this spiritual experience, but that like I almost immediately questioned it. Like, could this really have been God talking to me? Maybe I just imagined it. Maybe it was the emotion of the moment that I was at this retreat. There was a lot of good stuff happening. The emotions kind of ran high. Maybe I just got caught up in all of that. And that's what I was feeling. It was like, I feel good because I'm with all these people who love Jesus, because I'm having this time for prayer. Maybe that's all it was. Or maybe it was because, like most youth retreats, I had stayed up all night the night before and was super sleep deprived, right? Like maybe that's all it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, like coming to it, the more I thought about it, the more it was making sense. But what happened coming off of that retreat was a really amazing thing, which was that just like the first time I thought about the vocation was other people telling me, my classmates voting me most likely to become a priest. So that was the first thing that got me thinking about it. Then I had the personal experience. When I came back from that retreat, it was my religion teacher pulled me aside after class and asked me extremely sincerely if I had ever thought about becoming a priest. And so I lied to him and said no. I don't recommend that, by the way. Don't lie to your religion teacher.
Yeah.
But he meant it, and he had been in the seminary. And it's funny because I've now as an adult become friends with him, and what a great guy and what a huge support to me as a priest. But it was so much, it was his example and his sincerity in asking me that. Again, a man who had gone to the seminary, who had discerned really seriously if God was calling him to be a priest. So that was huge. Then I had like a lady who volunteered with our youth group, pulled me aside and asked me if I'd ever thought about being a priest. She was not with the youth group when we went to this retreat, so she didn't know what had happened. But there she is asking me, like out of the blue. This was not a normal question either that I had ever heard anybody ask anybody else. But I'm suddenly asked by two different people who I really respect. Is God calling you to be a priest? Do you think that you should be a priest? Maybe I think you would be a good priest. The sign of peace one day at Mass, I turned around, there's an old lady, and she shook my hand and said, "You should be a priest." I have no idea who she is. I've never seen her since. I'd never seen her before. And she's telling me to be a priest. I'm like, what is happening here? And then this is like the best part of my story that people always laugh at, is that I did get a girlfriend. I did prove my classmates wrong, at least on that one thing that I decided they were saying. Again, I don't know if they actually didn't think I would ever have a girlfriend, but I got one. And I was sitting with her one day, and we were on the couch, and she leaned her head on my shoulder, and she smelled nice and everything, and she said, "I think that you're going to be a priest." And did we just break up? Like, what was that? What the heck?
Yeah.
It was so sincere, and she said, "No, I'm not breaking up with you. I just think that you're going to be a priest." So what was happening was all these people who either actually knew me and cared about me, or just people who I would not expect, were saying, "I think you're going to be a priest," or "I think you should be a priest," or "I think you should think about being a priest." And that got me realizing that it's not just a personal experience that I imagined. There's something that people are noticing that maybe I ought to pay attention to. Not just because, like, I am not a person who thinks that we should be overly concerned with what other people think of us, right? Like if we fall into that trap, we end up giving into all kinds of crazy things. But there was something that was pulling me in that direction that I had to pay attention to. And it turned out to be one of the greatest gifts, because I was able to say, all right, if I'm not called to the priesthood, that's okay. But maybe I am, and I should give it some thought. I should give it some time.
Dang, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. Did you go right into seminary after high school then, or like was there college in there, or?
Yeah, I decided on college seminary. So we had our own pre-theology and college house here in the diocese at the time. And part of my motivation there, like I was thinking I'll go to college and I'll deal with this after college, but the idea wouldn't go away. And I realized that if I went to college, number one, the idea was going to be in the back of my mind, rattling around in my heart. And I wasn't going to have a moment's peace. I was going to be worried that everything I was doing was potentially interfering with my future vocation, because I had experienced this idea that God was calling me to the priesthood. So I was like, if I'm going to go to college, I'm going to go to a party, and the whole time I'm going to be thinking about becoming a priest instead of like meeting people and talking to people and doing college kid stuff. And I realized it's probably better that I don't do college kid stuff. That's not necessarily going to be really helpful for me in the long run. But I just had this sense that, yeah, I've got to give some time to this. And the other thing was going to visit the seminary, and I met these guys. Like, there was a couple of guys who were undergrads, and then there were these guys who were there as pre-theologians. So they were doing their pre-theology philosophy studies. They had already gone to college, and I'm looking at them. One guy was on the corporate ladder. He was climbing the ranks in corporate America, doing really, really well for himself, when the thought of priesthood came really strong to him. So he stopped everything that he was doing and left his career and went to the seminary to discern. He ended up discerning out, but he gave a full year to asking the Lord, what is it that you want? And what are you calling me to? There was a guy who had his own small business. He sold the business in order to go to the seminary, and he's a priest now. There were other guys who had given up a lot of stuff or who had accomplished a lot of things, and I realized I have nothing at all to give up. Like, if I go to the seminary as a college student, if I go for a year and discern that I'm not called to the priesthood, the only thing that happened is I got a year of college credit under my belt and can then transfer into any college I want. Like, I'm not losing anything. I'm not losing money because seminary was also free for us. So I'm not going to like lose anything. I'm just going. I'm going to do this, and that's going to be it. And so there was an amazing moment for me of just realizing I've got nothing to lose by going to the seminary. I've got nothing at all to lose. I've got everything to gain. If I'm called to the priesthood, then I'll figure it out. And if I'm not called to the priesthood, it'll be okay. It makes perfect sense for me to go and give this a shot, even if it's not what God wants me to do. If it's not what he's calling me to, he's going to show me. And if it is what he's calling me to, then I will have done exactly the right thing.
Yeah, and it's crazy that like God works with us in our places of life, right? Like sometimes we really need a super low bar of entry or barrier of entry, right? Like he's like I just want to make it easy as possible for you to like jump and make a decision.
Yeah.
And then when you do, he like blesses it.
Right.
But like that doesn't change the gravity of that decision. Because in comparison to like other guys who make the same decision to go to seminary, but they are giving up so much, like there's something interesting the way that the Lord works with like us on an individual level, where like, like you can see the external of like, giving up a business is a lot, and all of this is a lot, but then, he's working in the same way in your life, just like in the same calling, but like in a, I don't know if you know what I'm trying to get at.
I do.
To make sense of.
There's a certain sort of competitive nature that we have, right? And like, I think guys especially are prone to this. Like, I want to compete. I want to demonstrate that I'm as good as or better than this man. So I'm gonna try to compete. So I'm gonna compare myself to this person, and to see if I measure up, right? And that's, first of all, it's very present in seminaries. You just spend a few minutes with seminarians and you're going to notice that they're competing against each other. But what I started to notice was happening was, like, at first it was almost a shameful comparison. So I'm looking at these guys who have actually given something up and feeling bad that I have nothing to sacrifice. And then over time, especially as I got into major seminary, when I was in theology, like, my classmates were and are among the most impressive men I've ever met in my life. And I started, instead of feeling like I had nothing to offer, it shifted from being like a competition of I want to be better than these guys to I want to try to be like them. Have you ever seen Band of Brothers?
I have not.
Oh man, it's amazing. I find a lot of spiritual parallels with Band of Brothers.
But
there's
you're not the only one. I think there's a lot of people who like. Yeah, Band of Brothers is like on par with like DeSales' Introduction of Outlife with what it's done for their spiritual life.
Yeah, there's this one scene, and it's a really subtle one. Captain Winters is he's been granted a leave, so he goes to Paris for a few days just to get some rest, and he's on the subway in Paris, and the subway comes to the end of the line, and there's this French boy who tells him that it's the end of the line and he has to get off the train. So he gets off the train, and as he's walking out of the station, the kid is looking at him, and he sees him. He's in his full dress uniform. He's very impressive looking. And this little kid who's got like grubby fingers and is wearing ratty clothes is looking at this American soldier, and he kind of like straightens up and he tries to stand like him. So he's looking at this little boy, like admiring this soldier, trying to stand like the soldier, trying to look like him. And he's like, I can do this. And that's how I felt as a seminarian, looking at other seminarians. Like, these guys are so cool. They've done so much stuff. I just need to be like them. And that was all I wanted, was like, maybe I could just be a little bit like them. And I'm like, if that's my reason for going to seminary, which it was like, in addition to feeling this call and this pull to the priesthood, these are the guys who I look up to, and I admire them for this. And I started to realize it wasn't about competing against them or trying to one up them or trying to be better than them. It was more like, these are the examples that I want to look to, that I can emulate, that I can imitate, that I can strive for.
Yeah. It's interesting how like that got brought out of you when you get placed in the seminary, like this desire or this like competition. Like, I've got a younger brother who's like 14 months younger than me. He helps co-host this podcast. So I get to hop on later next week and talk about this interview and like what insights come from this and this conversation and your story. But like, always the spirit of competition with him, right? Yeah. Like, growing up, like, always like, you know, if I'm going to play football, he's going to play football. If I'm going to wrestle, he's going to wrestle, and we're going to try to be the best. And it's interesting how that gets pulled out, like you're saying, in seminary, and how you saw it kind of progress through your life, though, from this place of just competition to like more of a like, no, actually, like, these people are inspiring me. And I've seen a similar thing happen with my brother, where it's like, it's no longer like I'm competing to be a better husband than he is or a better dad. It's like, we look at each other, and like, I look at him, I'm like, I'm inspired, right? Like, he does some things really well as a dad, and like, I could take that and learn from that. And there's like this calling on, as opposed to like, I want to be better because I just want to be better for competition's sake. Yeah. So,
you know, I like that you're bringing it up with your brother, and you guys being so close in age is really interesting. My brother and I are 4 years apart. And so the competition was never anything further than the backyard. Right. Sure. Like, because we never played in the same leagues when we played sports. And in high school, we didn't overlap at all. I graduated and then he started. So we weren't in high school at the same time. And by the time he was in middle school, I knew that I couldn't compete against him athletically anymore anyway. He was a great athlete. Like, my brother was really good at stuff. And I knew that like he could run circles around me and was way better than I would ever be. And I should just give up trying to beat him at anything, because he had more of a competitive edge with sports especially. And he was just better than me at that. But part of it, I'm realizing just talking to you. So this is good. You're helping me process something that I don't think I ever noticed. So appreciate that.
Sure.
That's what podcasts are for, right?
Right. Exactly. The external processing.
Yeah. I think one element of being in the seminary that was really helpful for me was that it was an environment where we talked about brothers. We talked about my brother seminarians. At least the vocabulary of fraternity was being used, if actual fraternity wasn't always as present as we would want it to be, right? Or if actual fraternity was something that we were still figuring out. We used the vocabulary of fraternity as though we understood it, as though it existed. And I would say, like, looking at these guys, what I found in them was older brothers. The thing I never had. I never had a brother, an older brother. I had a younger brother. I never had any sisters, so religious sisters took that place for me too. I think that's the reason that I have a strong affection for religious sisters also. But the idea of having older brothers, guys who would kind of call me on, challenge me, and whose example I could look to and say, I want to try to be like that. I want to try to do that. Yeah, hugely important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that like kind of weaves into like, with these interviews, I'd love to hear, okay, where have guys been? What's their story? And then like really kind of zone in on like this topic of brotherhood. And I think it's like kind of a good diving point into like, what has brotherhood looked like for you? And you can go back like growing up, or you can like go to the present here and now. Like, what does brotherhood look like as a priest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, well, I would look back. Obviously, the first experience of brotherhood is with my brother, and that's sort of always been the model for me. Is my brother as the example of what a brother is and what it looks like to have a brother, and because we've got the 4 years apart, there was a certain way in which, as the big brother, I felt like a certain responsibility for him, and then also as a big brother, as he got older, I definitely would sometimes feel like the younger brother tagging along is a pain in the neck, and so I'm gonna try to get away from him. I'm gonna try to escape. But there was always a sense of I think I've always felt like I'm close to him, and we're together, even if with fighting and different things that can happen. I remember I have an aunt and she adopted two boys. And when she did that, they were a little bit older, and she was, I think, kind of surprised to find that these two boys who were biological brothers were fighting. And she said to my mom, I never saw Sam and Gabe do that. And my mom said, well, of course you didn't. They were under strict orders to behave themselves when we had company. They knew how much trouble they'd be in if they did any kind of fighting in front of people. That's for the privacy of our own home. We don't do that when we have guests. We're on our best behavior there. Of course you never saw them fight, because that's just we just knew better. But we fought plenty. We weren't unusual in that regard. But there was I think really my understanding of a brother is one who's just always there, who's in your life and who's present. And then with that, there's the brotherhood that extends, that you don't realize is brotherhood, but it's friends. It's the people you grew up with. And growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up in, I feel like I had a very normal childhood. I grew up playing outside a lot. Of course, I grew up long before there was such a thing as cell phones or the internet. I'm older than I look. We had dial-up internet through the end of my high school years. So it was a huge deal when my parents got something that wasn't dial-up internet. And this kind of stuff, being outside, the neighbors and the kids in the neighborhood just being people who I played with and who I'd hang out with, it was all so normal. And those are people who, their influence in my life, I can't underestimate. And then in high school, especially, there were four of us who were really good friends. Mike, Bob, Jay, and myself. And Mike is a priest now also. The two of us both became priests. And it was over the course of our 4 years of high school, these guys became very much these were the closest guys I had in my life. And the bond was very real. Now, time passes, and since high school, we've definitely drifted a bit, but every once in a while, Bob in particular does this, out of nowhere. I'll just get a call from him or a text or something. And it happens rarely, but it's amazingly well placed. It's somehow he just knows exactly when to check in. And that's been tremendous. And then of course in the seminary, you discover this fraternity, it's shifting everything from the brotherhood of blood, or that brotherhood of circumstance, because we're in the same grade, because we're in the same class, because alphabetically our names are close to each other, so we ended up sitting near each other in class. It starts to shift to this other sort of brotherhood where it's this is what it means to be a brother in Christ. And you start to understand, some of these guys I would never have chosen to spend time with based on our shared interests or lack of shared interests. But because we are pursuing the priesthood, this man is my brother. And then you start to discover these other things about him. And you realize that the surface level stuff really doesn't matter. I would look at that though and say, I think as a seminarian, it took me a long time to understand that fuller depth and the things that a brother seminarian could offer. And so, I look at my years in seminary, and I think that in some cases, one of the most important things for me was correction, to be corrected by a brother seminarian, and to find out that correction didn't mean having a fight, or correction didn't mean getting beat up. Correction also didn't mean getting yelled at. Correction just meant, hey, maybe do this. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I want you to succeed.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what a huge difference. And I remember one buddy of mine like offered a correction, and I think he was annoyed with me when he did it. Like, and rightly so. He should have been annoyed with me. His emotional reaction was absolutely correct. And I realized that what I had done had annoyed him, even though what I was doing wasn't directly to him. But the reason it annoyed him was that when he looked at me, he expected better of me. And in a way,
Do you remember what you did, or are you at freedom to share?
Yeah. No, I can share. I think what it was I just made like an unnecessarily uncharitable comment about somebody else. There's no reason to do it. It was unnecessary. It was small, and it was out of line, and he let me know right away. And I went to him to apologize because the person that I was making the comment about wasn't there. It was a third party uncharitable comment, like about something distant. And I went to him to apologize to the guy who corrected me. And he said, "It's okay. I just think you're better than that."
Yeah.
And that was really like, to know that somebody thought that I was good. Not that I had plenty of people who thought I was good. I had experienced that plenty of times. It's not like this was an absent experience in my life. But to have a brother seminarian say that, like, I think that you're better than that. And I want you to be better because I want you to be a good priest. And a good priest needs to be this way. And then I had this experience. I share this one because it's actually really dear to my heart. This happened actually just a couple of years ago with a guy who I was in the seminary with. I saw him at a class reunion, and afterwards he wrote me a note, and he shared something that I said to him once that really hurt him. And I was blown away that he would share that. And the truth was, I didn't remember it. Like, whatever it was that I said, I don't remember it. I don't remember it happening. I have no doubt that it happened. This guy doesn't make stuff up. I have no doubt that what I said was real. And so I called him, and we had a chance to talk about it, and for me to apologize too, to say, I don't want that at all. I don't want you to carry something like that I did, as a hurt anymore. And I certainly, I hope I didn't intend to hurt you. I'm sorry that I don't remember it, so that I can't apologize more fully, if anything,
Yeah.
But since then, we've been able to have some regular contact and some really good conversations. And I'm so grateful that he was able to tell me. And I think that's another aspect of brotherhood that's hugely important, because and maybe I think it's so important because it's an area that I'm probably pretty weak in. I think we've got to be able to share with our friends, with our brothers, like, hey, this hurts. Don't do that. We can't just laugh everything off. We can't just brush everything under the carpet. We can't just cut off every relationship because this guy annoyed me or this person hurt me. We need to be able to, like, we talk about it in Catholic psych, right? The rupture and repair. But sometimes we have to be the agents of that rupture, or of that repair, rather. I'm usually the agent of the rupture. I want to be the agent of repair. Like how important it is to be able to say that, to offer that correction. And man, like, I'm thick-headed. You heard how many people it took to get through to me that I should be a priest, right? Like God himself, all these other people. Like, then in that case, I might need to be told that something I did hurt, but that's going to call me on to something greater. It's going to call me to repentance. It's going to invite me to apologize. That could lead to reconciliation, but it also challenges me to be better and to be more virtuous, to do what's right.
Yeah. I really appreciate like your humility and a few things here, just looking at, like going way back to like when you're talking about, just receiving correction. Like, it takes a little bit to receive correction from an older brother seminarian or an older brother in general, and to not just be like, whatever, dude, right? Like, just to kind of write it off. Like,
Yeah.
but to have the humility to be like, no, you're right. Like, I could be better here, right? Like, to actually internalize that, that's awesome. And then also even the humility to be like, yeah, I was in the wrong. Like, I sincerely apologize for saying that. Like, I don't, like, you didn't remember it, but like, you know, it hurt him. And like, to have the humility to say, yeah, I was wrong here, I think is just really awesome. And I want to highlight that because it's, something that I'm challenged into, like just growing in that like desire for repair and relationship. It takes a lot just to kind of see like, oh yeah, I screwed up here. Like I should be like going and asking for forgiveness. And the hardest relationships those exist in, or the hardest moments those exist in, is like those close relationships that you have with people where you're like,
Right.
I need to go talk to, like, for me, it's like my wife, right? Like, I screwed up. Like, will you please forgive me? Like, I've gotten accustomed to saying that to my boys because, like, I get angry with them every other second. And it's like, all right, I'm sorry. I should have been more gentle. But it's like my wife that it's like, man, like, I need to apologize for screwing up here. And our brothers can have a similar effect, too, where it's like they're really close to us. And, like, actually look yourself in and see, like, okay, yeah, I screwed up. There's something here that I need to get right. So it's like, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that and like the importance of repair and rupture. And particularly as it pertains to growing closer to brothers. There's something really good about letting ourselves be seen in our brokenness before our brothers, but also like recognizing the good in our brothers as well. So like not only like running to repair the areas where we screwed up, but also being like, hey dude, no, like you're pretty awesome. Like you're doing great. Like it hit differently for you when that older brother priest like acknowledged, no, you're good. Like you're better than this.
Yeah.
Than it did anyone else. Right. And that's what we have like the capability of doing with brothers in our lives, to be able to say something like that. Cause it's like, it's one thing, like for me, like, yeah, my wife married me, her compliments are great, but like, you know, there's a vow there. Like, like, yeah. It's like, it's kind of like expectant. Maybe that's my own prideful parts, you know, speaking like the expect the compliments, but it's like when a brother like really like, hey, no, like you did a good job. Like there's something that like rises up in our hearts a little bit at that. Yeah.
And I think maybe it was also like breaking through of some of the, I don't know if it was defensiveness. I like to blame culture instead. I'm from the Northeast, sure. Right? So, from being from New England, the tri-state area, you know, close to New York City, we have a tendency towards sarcasm that for people who are not from this region sometimes comes across as we're just mean or angry all the time. And we're not really mean or angry, but it can definitely come across as we're a little too blunt, a little too direct. And sometimes we pick on certain things and like we'll tease each other about it, but it doesn't always sound like we're teasing. It sounds sometimes like we're really attacking. And I started learning, this is the advantage of being in seminary with guys from all over the country. You start learning that not everybody talks this way. Not everybody approaches things this way. And what you think is just like joking around is actually pretty significant. There's actually an edge to this. There's actually a bite that I don't think you really want to have. And it got me thinking a little bit about maybe if there's a bite to anything that I'm saying or doing, maybe there's something else that I'm dealing with. Like maybe in some way I'm trying to make myself look a certain way, look more confident or competent, look more intelligent or look more aware of what's going on. And maybe I should just be a little bit more gentle about that stuff, or maybe I don't need to say anything. Maybe I should just shut up every once in a while, and that would be a great thing. And you start to learn like, oh yeah, not everything requires my commentary. And furthermore, like I don't really have that much to say. I think that's part of the reason actually that I kind of struggled with social media, because I had come to this place in my own life where I felt like, I don't need to have a comment on everything. And then social media comes into existence and I'm on social media. I never got further than Facebook. But there I am. I was, like using social media, and you're just kind of being bombarded all the time by people's opinions, by these thoughts, by commentary on everything. And you feel like you have to respond or defend yourself or get into stuff. And it took me a long time, but I finally just said, that's not what so I got off social media entirely. I just don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
I have plenty of tendencies towards that defensiveness and towards like getting really aggressive with the things that I say. I don't need social media to help me with that at all.
Yeah, it is like social media is like everyone has a comment about everything there, so
yeah.
It's just the perfect culture to throw in your words if you're already prone to that. But yeah. What one last thing that I want to kind of like ask before we wrap things up is like a question that I love to leave off with guys that come on to the podcast is like, where can you see areas to grow? And I ask this because it's like, as men, I think it's really inspiring to see other men wanting to grow. And it also kind of helps reveal to us, like, I think in a lot of ways, guys have pretty similar areas that we need to strive for virtue in across the board. So that's something I like to ask, just to kind of look at, like, and it's like big, small, whatever it is. It's like something that there's value in sharing. Like this is something that the Lord's calling me to work on. This is something the Lord's like pointing to me to say, like, hey, you could like do better. I don't know. Depends on how the Lord speaks to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's that for you?
I think the thing that I'm probably worst at with regard to brothers and frankly even with family. Like I talked to my biological brother yesterday, and it was probably the first time we were on the phone with each other in a month. We text often, we check in with each other. Like I never feel any distance. I think at least with family, it's kind of safe because my feeling is that in my family, there was always a sense that we are never disconnected from family. And so even if I haven't seen a family member for a long time, the attitude that I always have received from members of my family is great to see you. Let's talk. And if I saw you yesterday or 2 years ago, how you doing? It's great to see you. Let's talk. Fill me in. But not like there's a disconnect. I don't know you. I don't feel close to you at all. There's a sense of like we're together. But I think sometimes I presume that in other relationships, in friendships, especially with brother priests, with guys who I studied with in seminary, with friends who I might not get a chance to see as frequently. And I realized that an area that I need to be really attentive in is checking in, just saying hello, picking up the phone every once in a while and making the call. That there's a value, and it's a real value, to connecting with people who you care about and letting them know that you care, even though you know that you care. Like I know that I care about my classmates from the seminary, but I don't necessarily pick up the phone often enough to talk to them or to let them know that. But man, what a difference it makes when they call. There's one of my classmates, he makes the rounds and he calls pretty regularly. And by pretty regularly, I mean at least a couple of times a year. He calls and he just checks in with guys. Hey, it's been a while since I've heard from you. How you doing? And he was the oldest guy in my class. We call him Dad.
Yeah, nice.
But it's this great move that he does, just to check in. How's it going? Do you need anything? Yeah. And I realized that that's definitely an area that I need to grow in. I need to be better at doing that kind of stuff. And this is one of those areas, like I think CPMAP really helped me in this, because it unlocked something for me about what I want for my brother priests. And part of what you realize is here's the desire, here's this dream that I have. And then there's a part of that, if that's going to happen, that I have to do. Like I have to be responsible for going and actually inviting this guy to something, or I have to be responsible for picking up the phone and checking in. Like if I want to make sure that priests are doing well, I need to actually talk to priests. If I want to have this kind of thing there, like I've got to actually make the effort. So like, I think that's probably the area where, for me, I see the greatest need for personal growth. Like this is the spot that I need to be really attentive to that.
Yeah, I think there's something really great about being both on the receiving end of that check-in, like you're saying, like when your fellow seminarians who are in your class check in on you, like there's something that's really nice. Oh, like this person notices me, and like, and for you, like already having like that kind of predisposition of like connectedness, you're like, oh yeah, like maybe it doesn't hit quite as deep for you, even though it still feels good. Whereas like other people who don't have that kind of predisposition, like, oh, you're checking in on me, like you're noticing me, like, oh, that's that feels really good to have somebody kind of in my corner, like asking, like, how are you doing? And so being on the receiving end is like one thing, but then also like I think as a guy taking the initiative and like actually putting yourself out there to check in on other people does something for ourselves too, right? There's like something that's like the Lord is like working in on our own kind of like desire for individuality or a desire to just kind of remain by ourselves, to remain isolated, that we like fight against a little bit when we're like, no, I'm gonna go do this, even though I prefer to do maybe something else, or like I have 110 excuses not to do this thing.
Well, yeah, think about how many times you find yourself like isolating yourself. Like I just want to be alone. I just want to be by myself. But how often is that like I just want to be alone, accompanied by like the proverbial slam of the door, followed by shouting to everybody within earshot, "Just leave me alone." Like I'm slamming the door and shouting as loud as possible so that everybody can hear, "Leave me alone." But what I'm really saying is I'm desperate for somebody to notice me. You know?
Right.
Like
Right. Absolutely.
it's that like that push and pull, and like we do that with God too. Like if I'm being avoidant of prayer, if I'm not going to the chapel, or if I'm like cutting out quickly because I'm too tired, or I'm busy, I've got these other things to do, and then I'm upset about things that are going on either in the parish or in the diocese, or like I'm just struggling with something myself. And part of the prayer, the like 3 minutes that I throw in there when I genuflect is like, oh Jesus, I just wish that I wasn't dealing with this. It's really hard. And I'm all alone in this. I'm really struggling. And he's like, I'm here, right? Just come in. And it's this weird, it's a dynamic that I think we experience. And maybe I'm just manifesting my own conscience that this is a dynamic that I experience, of like, yeah, I've got to make sure that I'm doing those kinds of check-ins, because I do have that tendency towards just like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go on my own. I've got this. I'm fine. But it does sort of two things. Like it can make you forget that you need fraternal support, but it can also make you forget that your fraternal support is of value to somebody else. And like, I think for priests in particular, diocesan priests especially, because we don't necessarily live in community, and because we don't have always that sense of fraternity that's so important, we've got to be real careful, because that temptation then, or that avoidance of the fraternal relationship, it gets in the way. And it doesn't have to.
Yeah. I think that's good encouragement. I think the more priests that can hear that encouragement for fraternal engagement, the better. Just like, I don't know, I've seen a lot of priests in my life that you get bogged down in like just isolation. And I'm like, everyone needs somebody. We all need God, but we also need other human beings in our lives, right?
Right on.
And so I really appreciate you like offering that encouragement, because I'm sure there's priests out there that need to hear that, and hopefully they get connected with this podcast and are able to receive that encouragement to reach out to other priests. But I want to say thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I think we'll wrap things up here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been great to hear your story, hear about the way the Lord's been working in your life and continues to. Thanks so much for checking out this episode of the Hey Brother podcast with Father Sam. You can find more about his podcast, The Tangent, in the show notes below, or if you look up The Tangent on Spotify, you can find his podcast there. Or if you're a priest who's listening to this and you're interested in what he does as a mentor, he mentors priests the same way that I mentor folks through Catholic Psych, and really helps equip priests to live more fully that vocational call out, using our psychological science is to help priests, and something that I know a lot of priests could benefit from. So if you want to check that out, I'll put his partner page to the Catholic Psych Institute in the show notes below as well. But again, thank you so much for checking out this episode. If it's been a blessing to you, this podcast, this show, please like it, subscribe to it, share it with a brother who might need it. That really helps us get this message out, this message of creating this community online of helping guys become who God's created them to be. So we would appreciate it if you could do that, and catch you guys next time.